just below the screen. I will be answering. Okay, Amy, it's all yours.
All right, great, thank you. So just bear with me 1 second while I pull up our presentation right here. It'll just take 1 second to get it going. And now, can you see my full screen? Are we good? All right. So my name is Amy Hebdon, and we're going to be talking about how to unlock the magic of segmentation using just the AdWords interface. So just as a little bit of background, I want to tell you just a little tiny bit about my company. I work for a company called Blast Analytics and Marketing, and we do marketing and analytics. We focus on analytics strategy, implementation, reporting, and analysis. And then for marketing, we also do paid search management, SEO, and content strategy, in addition to marketing automation, UX testing, and so on. And we are big Google fans. We're Google Premium partners for analytics, and then we are also Google partners for paid search. And as for me, I've been doing paid search marketing for about 12 years. So I've got a lot of experience of this. I've been doing it since 2004, 2005. And I think that paid search is an amazing blend of art and science. You know, you definitely have the technical and analytical side, but then you have the more artistic side where you're going to be more creative about messaging and copywriting. And I think they really serve each other well. They appeal to both halves of the brain. And I think that one of the really great things about being able to do paid search and really learning about how to use the different tools and getting everything going is you can kind of, after enough time, once you really know how it works, you go from just, being a competent paid search marketer to basically this level of almost wizardry that you're able to kind of command the elements of what you're working on with, with revenue and sales while you're decreasing costs. And you kind of become almost a wizard at it, just the way you're able to control everything, which is why I'm using this kind of wizard and magic analogy. So thinking about, what a wizard does and what a wizard is, when we think of wizards, they tend to be omniscient or all-knowing, right? They're very knowledgeable about the past, present, and future of something. There's no real surprises. So applying that to paid search, with these tactics, we'll be able to become, deeply very knowledgeable about accounts. So that's one benefit of using the segmentation magic. The next one is that you can expertly solve problems. When you think of wizards, they have the perfect solution for something, and the segmentation, like using this, will be able to get a really clear solution to a problem. And then finally, swiftly achieve extraordinary results. Like, this is something that we can do fairly rapidly to execute and then to really get the results. And it's not a long process. Sometimes it can take longer than others, but for the most part, we're implementing changes today. We're going to see the results tomorrow and this week and this month, and it's fairly quick. So it's a really fun thing to do, I think, to be able to use segmentation to kind of to just build your own prowess and ability to get just amazing results for yourself or for your clients. We're going to start with a quick story, a little background about Howard Moskowitz. And he, like Malcolm Gladwell, famously tells this story. He was a psychotherapist and behavioral researcher, and he's basically in the business of measuring things. And in the 1970s, he was commissioned with finding the perfect level of sweetness to create a perfect Pepsi. And so he was running all sorts of taste tests. He's analyzing the data, and he's trying to find basically a clean bell curve to determine the ideal level of sweetness. But in fact, there wasn't an obvious pattern. There were just various sweetness clusters. And so he was having a really hard time with this. And it was actually a bit later that he kind of came up with this aha moment, which was, this is his quote, was, "There is no perfect Pepsi, only perfect Pepsis." And this kind of speaks to segmentation. Basically, we've been asking the wrong question. So this is a good way to understand what we're talking about with segmentation, that different market segments have different needs. Just like if you were to come up with the perfect size for a pair of pants, if you come up with an average of medium, you're you're excluding the large market and you're excluding the small market. It just doesn't work for everyone. We need different segments. And so this really kind of challenges the one-size-fits-all model, because we have different tastes, and you can't make just one product that's sweet enough for one person and not too sweet for someone else who doesn't like sweet as much. We need to break this out by unique segments, and this has a lot of implications for marketing and paid search, because it has to do with how we're going to view the data. So in this presentation, we'll be looking at segment with both the noun and the verb. So the verb, like to segment, we're talking about to slice and dice something into meaningful and actionable groups. And then we'll also be looking at the noun, which is a meaningful, actionable market or data set. And when we're talking about magical segments, they are meaningful and actionable segments. And we'll get into what it means to be meaningful and actionable if you don't already have a picture in your head of that. One thing to be cautious, though, like when we're talking about magic, it's very powerful, and so with great power comes great responsibility, and this is true for what we're looking at with paid search, because while we don't have access to magic, what we do have access to is a lot of data, so we need to be very careful to not be fooled by randomness. So even though there's so much that we can control with different settings and different bids and budgets and keywords and strategies and everything, we need to be careful that we really understand what it is we're doing, like the changes that we're making, so it doesn't just get out of control. So focusing on meaningful segmentation rather than just randomness. Meaningful segmentation teaches us about our audience and about our accounts. And so meaningful market segments have similar wants, needs, and demand characteristics. And then when we're looking at meaningful data segments, that has similar behavior and settings requirements. So that's how we're going to kind of define what a meaningful segment is. So here, as an example of some different segments, I took an account and I kind of organized it into how it's performing. And you can see that the top performers of this account, you can see that they're driving quite a few leads. Like if you look at the top 5, that accounts for more than most of the bottom in terms of leads, and they all have a really low CPL. Whereas when we look at the last several bars, we have almost no leads, and we have a relatively high CPL comparatively. Some got 0 leads, but others, we're looking at $126 CPL for some of them. So what we could do is we could start making changes on this, because we can start to assign meaning and say, okay, the good group and the bad group. And I know a lot of people who would start to make changes this way. And you could even pretty reasonably start to convince your boss, okay, we have to take action. We need to grow the top segment because it's working well, and we need to minimize the impact of the bottom segment because it's just not working at all. And you could start to approach it like that. But when we're looking at meaning, we're having to say, besides what the data is suggesting, does this actually have meaning for us? And just to reveal what this is it's I segmented by search terms and their alphabetical performance. So the search term is not even the keyword that we're entering, it's just the word that someone is searching on. So not only would it be pretty impossible to start segmenting like by lowering bids based on what someone's searching on when we're not bidding on it in the first place, it's impossible, it's impractical, and it's the wrong move. If anything, we want to understand like what are the keywords that are influencing this, how would this be useful, like how does this inform our keyword strategy, and just be more strategic as a whole rather than just kind of shooting, just trying to get something that's really not going to work. We can't actually go after search terms, and it wouldn't make sense to. But we can start to understand better, like what is working, what isn't. But this is just an example where something maybe suggests meaning and there isn't any. So we do have to be very cautious. Like, is it meaningful and is it actionable? So this next section, how to day part according to the internet. Now, I want to throw in some caution here because I have used this slide in a past, share that I did, and it was completely taken the wrong way. So my point in looking at this is if we look at the very top hour of the day at 5 o'clock, the conversion rate is low. And if we look at 9 o'clock, the conversion rate is high. It's like almost a 9% versus like a 3%. And so this is a screen grab. It says, notice how 5 a.m. is, you know, low and 9 a.m. is high. And so that's, you know, that's 2 data points, but this is really meaningless because unless we have more information, if we were to start trying to take action on this and like lower the bid for 5 a.m. and increase it for 9, we'd be really doing ourselves a disservice because this isn't enough data to like meaningfully understand anything. And these hours, it's only 4 hours apart. So we want to understand how the groups of time relate to each other and take action on something that is meaningful, not just 2 random data points. And so my purpose in showing this is not to say that you should start day parting and adjusting bids based on the hour of the day. I mean, there could definitely be a case for that, but you don't want to just start going in like, you know, taking the shotgun approach and just responding to data without understanding the meaning behind it. We want to get to the meaning first and then start optimizing based on that. So this is not a how-to example. This is kind of a how-to-not example. Don't just go in blindly and just respond to random metrics because there's really not enough here to be statistically significant to really inform something that's going to be helpful for your account. So I would not recommend this. I'm kind of giving it a cautionary example here. In addition to being meaningful, we also want our segments to be actionable. And actionable segmentation lets us improve our account based on what we've learned. And there's a little bit of a frustration here using Google AdWords with tablets because we can see that tablets perform differently than computers, but that's not broken out. So even though we're like, okay, you know, this is maybe performing worse and so we want to bid it down, we actually can't do that. So that's one of the probably few examples that we have within AdWords where we can actually see how something works and it isn't actionable. A lot of things within AdWords, within the interface, are actionable. So for the most part, it's really good. Another example for segmentation that we have to be careful about for, you know, is it actionable, is here's an example of someone who's, you know, the orange represents a potential to generate revenue. And if you look at this, this suggests that there are certain states that are more likely to generate revenue than other states, which is, you know, maybe interesting. And so there's kind of the tendency to say, okay, well, let's start to focus on the orange states and maybe optimize for that. Maybe we could increase the budgets. But the truth is that there's more to this than meets the eye. When we look at the distribution of U.S. population by state, you'll notice that those same states that were orange on the other map are blue on this map. So like a side-by-side comparison, you can see that they're almost the same. So really what we're looking at isn't so much the potential to generate revenue controlled for population. This just actually is population data. And so there's really, it's not super actionable. You know, how actionable is population data? If we only go after those states rather than where we're likely to see better conversion rates or return on investment, we're really, again, doing a disservice because there's a lot more competition in those states as well. It may or may not be the best use of bids and budgets and return. So we need to be paying more attention to the type of return than just going after segments that are interesting but not really actionable for us. So there's a lot that we can do with meaningful, actionable segments, and we'll be talking about segmenting and analyzing data, implementing and taking action, and then optimizing performance. And if you boil us down, this is basically learning plus doing equals growth. Like, I think that's a really basic formula for life, and that's kind of how we're going to approach segmentation. It's just we're going to learn about our account, we're going to take action on the account, and then we're going to optimize based on what we've learned and done, and we're going to see results that way. So the first step is analysis, or what can we learn from our data? And so segments help to tell that whole story, and I think this is a pretty common, confusing way that AdWords typically displays data. So we have here a location extension, and we look at the number of converted clicks from the location extension, like nine conversions. That's a lot of conversions from it. But then we segment it out to say this extension versus the other. So how many conversions did this particular extension get? And we see a different story. We see that it's actually 0 leads rather than 9 leads. And the reason for that is that location extensions can't actually trigger a conversion. So there's really no possibility of converting, but at the same time, it's really misleading based on the way that Google kind of defaults to showing the columns. So we have to have a better understanding of kind of how everything fits together in order to really get the whole story on how our different campaign elements are doing. So there's a lot of different ways that we can segment data. You know, we can do it within settings with changing the columns, looking at the display tab. Reports will allow us to do that. Just the structure of how the campaigns are set up. Changing the date range will change our performance. Just what our look back window is. Looking at the dimensions tab can be really helpful. There's different tools, audience segments, and then there's an actual button that says segment. And we can use all of these tools to better understand how our account's running and getting a little bit deeper beyond just like the surface level that may not be telling the whole story. So any screen in AdWords will give us multiple ways to view the data. And I have here several that are circled that kind of show what I just showed before. Campaigns also really could be a way to view the data, just by, you know, depending on how we are going to break out the campaigns and how we're going to structure everything. So there's a lot of different ways to access it. And most segments can be instantly applied. And if you've used AdWords, then you should be fairly familiar with, you know, just jumping into any segment or way to really filter or customize the data that's shown, and you can just, you know, see how something is working compared to something else. We have all these different options. And I'll be running through these, particularly for the segments. But there is something else I do want to just kind of point out is more of an advanced way to look at some different kinds of segments. And these segments, once you add them, you can start using for household income, universities, airports, and then central commercial areas, which means basically more of urban areas where there's a lot of foot traffic. I know it's kind of confusing what central commercial areas means, but just kind of remember if there's areas where people are more likely to kind of congregate and have a lot of foot traffic around. So the way that you're going to add these segments, which are not inherent in any account, but you need to go in and add them, is from the Settings tab. You're going to go to Locations, and then down at the bottom of the screen you can see a plus for Add Locations. Then you're going to go to Advanced Search, and you're going to go Location Groups. And so here's where you can choose places of interest, demographics, or specific locations. And then once you choose places of interest, you can choose one of these airports or central commercial areas or university. And just make sure you save as you go through, because if you miss saving something, then you'll lose your changes. But once you get that set up, then you'll be able to continue, kind of put that on the map and continue to track going forward. So if that's something that you think you'll want to use in the future, I'd recommend setting that up as soon as possible so you can start to collect data, because it starts collecting once you get this set up in the first place. So what can we learn about our customers? We can find out what they're looking for, and I think using a search term report was previously known as a search query report is one of the more basic ways to look at our kind of what our customers are searching for. I really like using the Dimensions tab for this, and the reason is if we're just looking at search terms within a campaign, then everything is segregated out by campaign and by ad group, and so really we could have certain terms that are all throughout our account just peppered in there, and it's hard to aggregate to kind of find those terms that either are or are not working. When we go to Dimensions, we don't have to be using the ad group or campaign view, so we can get a nice aggregate and start to see how things are performing like more holistically and start to make decisions based on that. So I feel like this is a nice time saver. It just makes it easier to kind of get an at-a-glance look at how search terms are performing. How quickly do our customers take action? We can find this by going up here to Tools at the top, and then you can see on the left that there's a lot of different attribution segments that we can apply. So this is looking at time lag, just as an example. Days to conversion. Here we have about 35% of our conversions happened more than 12 days after someone initially had visited. So this is really important to know, like if you make a change today, are you going to see results tomorrow or 2 weeks later? You know, we have to keep into account the lag time, otherwise we could be completely misattributing the results of something and not realize that that's what had happened. If we made a change 2 weeks ago and they make a slight tweak today, and tomorrow we see a bunch of results, it might be from that change we made 2 weeks ago. So we need to keep this in mind. This is a good segment for just how to understand how people are converting within our account. What actions are our visitors taking? And this is a segment of using the conversion name or category. One thing that's important to notice for this, if you use this segment, is if you look up at the top, the cost per conversion is basically $6.50. Any of the ones below it are more than that. And the reason is because instead of taking the total, like the very top line is all the conversions divided, the spend divided by all the conversions equals that cost per conversion. Underneath, each one is assuming that that was the only conversion that happened. So it's taking the same total spend and dividing it by the number of calls from ads. And so we have a higher cost per conversion, or then from MECLABS. And so none of these are actually accurate. The reason for that is if we have one channel or source that's driving multiple conversions on a page, there's no real way to reconcile which channel type it was from there, like which one was going to result in those conversions. And so none of these are true. So that's something to keep in mind. If you break it out, you're going to see numbers that are higher than the actual number. So just kind of, you can use this to see how many conversions they drove, and that will be accurate, but this, like the cost per conversion, will not be at this point. Another way you can see what actions visitors are taking is through click type. So here, by segmenting through click type, we can see how many people clicked on the headline versus a site link versus mobile clicks to call, get directions, and get location details. This is where we have location extensions implemented. So headline and site link can both generate converted clicks. I had mentioned before that mobile clicks, that location extensions don't generate, like the extension itself does not generate a conversion. So mobile clicks to call, get directions, and get location details won't trigger a conversion action. But if that's something that's important to our client or to our company to be able to, drive those metrics for customers, that is something we want to make sure we're reporting on. Look how many get directions you got. 189 clicks. Like that is an added value in addition to the conversions that we're driving as well. So that's something to make sure we're looking at if we are using location extensions. Call details is another one. You may or may not be tracking calls as conversions. In this case, this is where we're going to a client saying, look, some of your calls resulted in 40-minute phone calls after someone clicked on an ad. Like you might want to consider counting that as a conversion, because that shows definitely a lot of interest there. So like maybe we can relook at, maybe you don't want to do a 60-second phone call counts as a conversion, but maybe somewhere there's a certain line where we can draw to better, better align what's happening with the conversions we're counting. And then, recently within the last 6 months, Google added YouTube right into the interface. Previously you had to jump into a different interface to see what was happening, but now we can see the performance of TrueView in display and in stream right in the user interface, which makes it really nice. And we can also see the spend total there too, which is excellent. Display tab, we can get demographics on there based on basic demographic data of age, gender, parental status. I would caution you against using this to inform your strategy. I wouldn't look at this and say, hey, 60% of our customers are not parents, and so let's change how we approach things. Just because this is people who are clicking on display, it's going to skew younger, it's going to skew certain ways, and that's not necessarily your target audience. Those are people who are clicking. So I can tell you about what's happening within your display campaign. It can't tell you about your target as much, so I would use this with caution, but it can give you a breakout if that's what you're looking for, to be able to just report on who you're reaching. So now that we kind of have been able to learn a bit more about our customers, what can we learn about ourselves, or our company or our client through using the interface? So we can find out if we're being consistent in our application of settings. And the way you can do this is going to dimensions, and then within campaign details or ad group details, you can just see at a glance are we opting everything into the negative shared library, for instance, or are we using the same strategies across the board, or how's our mobile bid adjustments? We can start to see if everything's being consistent or not. So here we have one campaign that was not opted into the shared list, and so we can take care of that right away. Or, if there's a reason for it, definitely leave it off. But it just gives us a nice, at a glance, understanding of how everything is set up in the first place to make sure it's consistent and strategic. What's impacting our performance? Top movers is another way to see quickly, week over week or some period of time, what moved the needle the most, what accounts for the most changes this week over last week. Like, this honestly is not my favorite tool to use, but it can be very useful if you're just trying to kind of say, okay, what happened to kind of shake things up? Where's the biggest difference? You can check in the top movers and dimensions and see that. Top versus other is also useful to figure out if your search engine, if your position on the search engine results page is important. And here in this case, we can see definitely yes, it is. When we're on the top of the page, we have about a 22% click-through rate. When we're on the side, we have a less than 1% click-through rate. So that is something we want to take into account. Okay, it really does matter what our position is and where we show up. So we want to make sure that our bids allow us to be there as often as possible, since we only are getting conversions from that in the first place. And there's several different things to look into here, but we can see that works well for us, and so we want to make sure that that's where we show up. Is paid search cannibalizing organic? This is something that a lot of people have questions about. There's definitely a fear, I would say, that people don't want to pay twice. They've already, especially for brand terms, they've already got people to be aware of their brand, and they would rather someone convert from an organic listing than a paid listing where they have to, pay again. So this helps us better understand, like, what happens when only the ad was shown, what happens when only the organic listing is shown, and what happens when both of them were shown. So in order to get this set up, you do have to be linked up with, I believe at this point it's GA. It may also have to be webmaster tools too, but you will need to hook up additional functionality to be able to see this, but it will help you better communicate, either better understand or communicate to your clients what's happening and kind of the value of showing both the ad and the organic, and the lift that you tend to get when you're having both shown at the same time. How well ad extensions are actually performing. Looking at this extension versus the other, as I showed before, it can be hard to remember to do this all the time when you're just saying, okay, we're looking at the site link and then we see the converted clicks, and then we're like, hey, you drove a lot of converted clicks, but no, that's not the full story. And in this case, we have 8 clicks on the site link for the 94, 95 that actually happened, and it's at a nice CPL, which is great, but we do need to remember to break that out to go to this extension versus the other and segment in order to see that full data. How are our experiments doing? This is a nice quick way to use a segment experiment, and we can see there's a couple visual indicators that Google gives us to say whether how something's doing compared to the others, and if it's enough data or not to be able to make a decision on that based on the little arrows that they have down here. And then kind of how is anything doing, kind of using a wildcard. Dimensions, using labels, I find to be a very fast way to do this. And depending, again, on where you are, you may or may not have the liberty to change up your labels, but I really like doing it, especially for ads, so we can see really quickly just assigning a label to the different types of ads there are, and then seeing how everything's performing, so we can start to make decisions based on that, like with a really fast roll-up, instead of, for instance, having to find like certain words that may be in your ads and then being able to do an aggregate that way. This just shows you really quickly how everything's performing. So then the next section is implementation. So it's taking action on what we've learned about our customers or how we're performing in order to start driving results. So this is something that's fairly new that's been added to the AdWords interface, which is how keywords perform against specific ads, which I feel has always been a little bit frustrating, that your ad is assigned a quality score based on how relevant it is to the ad. Your keywords assign the quality score, but you have different ads that are running, so it's really hard to know which one they're pairing it against to give you that to give you that quality score if you're testing several different iterations, significantly different iterations of your ad. So you can see how, taking the ad and seeing how each of the keywords does against it can start to give you information about whether you'd want to break out a new ad group, for instance, if certain keywords perform better than others. It's a great way to be able to do that. Another thing to look at is adjusting network targeting by performance. And so this is looking at search versus display. I think a lot of us have moved from having these combined to actually breaking them out. But I know a lot of times, we're saying brand is brand, and something might all just be kind of combined together. But when like for this example, looking at, okay, branded terms is performing at $20 CPL. Now, assuming that's acceptable, we're probably not going to dive too deep into it to find out what is happening there. But when we break it out by network, well, search is doing amazing, at $16 CPL. And then display network is 163. Like, that might not be something we want to include in there. We might want to break that out, give it a different budget, so we have a lot more control over that rather than having them be combined. So that's just something, and I mean, I feel like that's fairly basic, but I also see enough campaigns or accounts where it's not set up that way I would say it's worth taking a look at, just in case you have any sort of legacy campaigns that are set to have search and display showing. Tightening the way you would switch that is by just going from search network with display select to search network only, and you'll be able to tighten your network for better control. Adjusting for the mobile moment. In 2015, Google reported, I believe this is a U.S. statistic. I don't know that it's worldwide, but there were more mobile searches than there were desktop after, I think in June 2015 is when that happened. And so really better understanding, people's devices are getting smarter and easier to use, and the web's getting more responsive on mobile phones. So really understanding how that impacts campaigns. What we knew 2 years ago to be true may not be true anymore. So this is looking at performance for 2014 versus 2015, and we can see that computers in this instance, improved, 75% improvement for conversion rate, but mobile devices had that's almost a 600% conversion rate. It did amazing. Where no one was converting in 2014, we have a higher conversion rate than computers in 2015. So a really big shift, and that's something we want to optimize for. Not, if mobile is being bid down, we want to maybe change that and take advantage of the great conversion rate. So it may be time to change mobile bids. AdWords suggests dividing mobile conversion rate with desktop conversion rate, subtracting 1. That's the formula that it gives. You can really do whatever you want. If you wanted to kind of slowly ease into it, you can do, change. If you were decreasing your mobile bid, you can start to change that in increments of 10% if you'd like. You can start to just optimize to what your comfort level is, see how it performs, then kind of continue to optimize. Another cautionary tale is Google has changed, AdWords has changed how it does location targeting pretty significantly in the last few years. So when we're looking at the dimension for the geographic view within Dimensions tab, this is what it's matching against. We're bidding against, where we want to show up in this campaign for United States, UK, Canada, and we have a little list there where we want to show up. And so we're able to see what matches against that and how we're doing, which is all, we're in an acceptable range for the most part. When we look at the view of user locations, that tells us a different story. That's where people actually are. And we see here, this is for a product that's not available in a lot of different countries. It's only available in certain regions. And we have a lot of traffic for Russia, Mexico, Brazil, Greece, India, and these different places where it doesn't benefit us to be because we don't offer the service in those countries. And so it's really a red flag. What are we doing there? We're not bidding to be there. So we have a couple options of how to handle that. If you notice a discrepancy between your user locations and where you want to be, one thing you can do is to change your setting, if you had previously been on, in searching for or who show interest in targeted location, you could switch that to just people who are in my targeted location and not give AdWords the flexibility to go beyond that. You can just kind of crack down on that as one option, which in some cases I would recommend just to kind of tighten how things are performing. Another option is to change the location targeting. Like, you can really target however you want to and however you need to. Google is extremely flexible in this, and it's a really great opportunity to kind of get more specific, and you can also layer. So you could target the United States and target Texas within the United States and set different bids for that, or really anywhere you want to be. You're able to get really specific in terms of targeting. So you can start to adjust bids when there's a reason to do so. Again, we don't want to just take the shotgun approach, but when there's a reason, when it makes sense to change the bid targeting by like targeting everywhere and then just making a specific bid adjustment for a specific area that is useful. Like in this case, the client was doing TV ads, and so we wanted to have additional bids and budget to support those TV ads, and so we adjusted the bids for those regions where they were running. And then we can also use location extensions to better understand the distance. And so in this case, this is for a company that has brick and mortar locations. In the cost per converted click, I don't think that this would be very surprising, but within a mile, we have a nice low CPL of around $14, and by the time someone's 40 miles away, the CPL is $30. The people who are very far from a location are less likely to be interested because it's a membership sort of thing, and so they're not going to have easy access to go. They're less likely to convert at that point. So one thing that we're able to do is go into location groups like how we reviewed earlier, and then we can start to do a bid adjustment there. So in this case, 5 miles around my location feed, rather than having to go to each location and change that bid, we can just say, anywhere I have a location, I want to increase the bid by a certain percentage, within a certain radius, which is a great way that we can target specific distances and kind of optimize that way. So for this final section here, we're looking at how to drive extraordinary results using the tactics and strategies that we're looking at. So we're going to combine meaningful segments and action for accelerated growth. So we're looking at kind of at the big picture here, from segmenting and analyzing the data to taking action to then making optimizations. So the first one that we're looking at is how to optimize account performance, and this is going to be looking at using the campaign structure, which I didn't go into a whole lot, but I'll kind of explain more here. I think campaign structure is an amazing way to be able to segment an account. So we want to find out what products and themes convert, and so segmenting by campaign here, we just don't get any information. There's a campaign that's called PPC. There's a campaign that's called non-mobile. New releases. Like, this does not tell me anything about the campaign. Like, I can see PPC is driving a lot of revenue. Well, non-mobile, I mean, that seems like that overlaps with PPC. It doesn't tell me anything, so it's going to be really hard for me to optimize. So the first thing that I wanted to do is to restructure the account. So I optimized the campaigns. Like, I broke things out. Okay, well, a lot of what was driving that PPC was brand. And then we also have like a distribution partner that we're licensed to use their terms. And then we have different product items and then specific characters. So brand only here is doing really, really well. So that's important to understand. So again, we can start optimizing, make sure that our ads are relevant to the brand and making sure that we're taking people to where they want to be on the website. And so by doing that, we drove revenue up by 280% because we were able to, again, kind of optimize the experience based on what people are actually looking for, rather than grouping things together in a way that they didn't make sense. Looking at optimizing the landing page in UX, we're going to use the destination URLs, which I guess now would be the final URLs for this to better understand how this is going to work together. I wanted to look at what landing pages are working the best. And so we segmenting by dimensions, looking at the destination URL. The the calculator landing page here, you can see, has the best conversion rate. It's almost 20%, but the pros and cons landing page has a CTR of 9.5%. So pros and cons landing page is kind of, it's a subset. There's only one ad group that's driving there. So the ad group has incredible click-through rate, but then the actual conversion rate is pretty low. So we want to see what we can better do about that. So we created an experiment to split the landing page traffic to say, you know, taking those same keywords, and I'm just using like a fake URL here, but you can see like we're driving some to the pros and cons landing page and some to the calculator landing page. And then the results were, once we did that, for the pros and cons ad group, the pros and cons landing page had a click-through conversion rate of 3%, and the calculator landing page had a conversion rate of 20%. So just because someone was using these certain keywords doesn't mean they wanted, I mean, there was a functional tool on calculator that just wasn't there on pros and cons. So I think that really explains why the conversion rate is higher. So maybe the goal would be to take the calculator and put it on the pros and cons page, but not just speak to, you know, not just use those same keywords on the page, but make sure there's something of value that's going to drive someone to convert. Like that page was just not as strong. And then our final example here is optimizing ad copy, looking at labels and search terms. So we had 82 ads across 23 ad groups. There's a lot of information to be looking at. And then there was a city headline, which featured the city for urgent care, and then the brand headline, which featured the brand, which I've used as Acme here for client privacy. But you can see that we wanted to see which one worked better. And so here are examples of each ads. So which treatment is better? Looking at labels. We have the city headline and the brand headline. So city has a good average position. It has a good click-through rate. Those are both outperforming the brand. But then the brand has a better conversion rate and a nicer cost per converted click. So just looking at this, it's kind of hard to know which one is better, because one does better pre-click and one does better post-click. And so which one, I mean, obviously we tend to want the better converted click price, right? But what is it that city headlines doing that brand isn't doing right in terms of, you know, while it's on the page? And so kind of going back to what we talked about before, with there's no perfect Pepsi, only perfect Pepsis. There's no perfect headline, only perfect headlines. So each of these is valuable, but what's kind of making them tick? And so looking at what search terms are in play, well, it turns out even though we weren't bidding on brand terms for this campaign, brand was sneaking in because we weren't negative matching every single instance that brand could possibly show up. So it was getting in there as a search term even though it didn't match up against the keyword. And because of that, that was affecting, you know, people who already were searching for the brand in the first place were more likely to convert on the brand. So we negative matched the brand terms, like just completely got in there and really scrubbed it. And then once we got rid of the brand terms, the city headline definitely outperformed the brand headline. We had a, you know, better click-through rate, better average CPC, better average position, and then we got all the converted clicks were coming through that just because we had a very low performance for the brand headline. So that was something that we were able to kind of break out, and then we were able to create a new campaign to support the brand terms to make sure that they were able to perform. So because brand was less relevant overall to this campaign, we removed the brand terms, we actually had an increase in CTR and an increase in conversion rate, which was an unexpected result for me just because brand usually does so well. But in this case, we're able to actually see a lift from removing brand terms. And so that was kind of fun. So just as a wrap up, we went through how segmentation can help us become deeply knowledgeable about our account by understanding better what our customers are doing, what our visitors are doing, and then how we're performing. We're able to see how to solve problems once we are able to identify where the problem areas are, and then to be able to implement solutions to solve them, and then to quickly start making changes to get extraordinary results. So I would invite you for a segmentation call to action to try a new approach to segment your data in ways that are meaningful and let you take action. So I think we have a little bit of time for questions, so I'm just going to exit out of this and jump back into sharing my Hangout screen. Hey there.
Okay, I got a couple of, I think it was sport questions, but before, where are you going?
Oh.
Don't go anywhere. Not
I'm
yet.
still here.
No. Stop sharing screen. Yeah. Okay. Great.
Can you see
Okay.
me? Okay.
We have a couple of sport questions. Unfortunately, two experts just left us. One had to really go well, kind of child emergency, whatever, and another one had a connection problem. Unfortunately. Okay. So a couple of sport questions. Before we go to them, we have standard question. Slides. Will they be available?
Yeah,
Yes.
I've got the slide deck posted right now that I can share the URL
Okay,
with you
you
for.
just give me a link. I'll share it
Yep.
on our web site, so it all will be available because slides usually you can read everything and so.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
you have if you check internal charts, there are a couple of questions. I think there was sport questions, so if you remember what you were talking about. So
Yep. Okay, so question, if we use the segmentation feature and select airports, does it automatically mean that more of our ads will go to someone who will be sitting in the airport and surf net from there? No, that's not what it means. It doesn't automatically do anything other than it starts to track that. So if you see that where your airports, where you have airport traffic that you are performing better, then you can adjust the bid. I wouldn't recommend adjusting the bid before you see how it's actually doing. So the first one is to just understand what's happening. And then the second thing, once you understand what's happening, then you can start making your bid adjustments. But adding the segmentation features just gives you that additional insight. So that's the first step. And then you will go in and adjust it. Does that answer that question?
well, I hope so. But if not,
Okay.
we will have follow-up question in a few minutes. Okay, just go for the
Okay,
next
great.
one.
So then the next thing says if we target USA in our campaign and then target Texas and then Houston, will ads be shown mostly in Houston? And then it says, what do you think about landing page with adaptive content depending on keyword? So I think those are probably two separate questions. So no, again, just like if we were targeting US and Canada, it doesn't give us more or less traffic from either of those targets. It just means we have visibility. So targeting just gives us visibility. Once we start making adjustments to the bid, that's when we, if we say we want to bump this up 50%, if we bumped Houston 50% above the US, then we would probably start to see more traffic, because our bids are that much higher. So it's likely that we might not, if it's a really small location, there may not be anything different. But it gives us that opportunity to. But the purpose of adding these different dimensions and segments is initially just so we can get visibility into what's working, and then we can start to adjust from there. And I'm not sure if the next question was for me about adaptive content depending on keyword, but I mean,
It's literally a question. I just copy it from a web.
Okay,
Page.
yeah, but I mean, it is a valid thing to do.
What do you think about
Yeah, so if you are able to adjust the landing page so it's more relevant to your visitor, do it. I caution against doing something that really isn't useful for someone. If someone types in a keyword and then you just use the keyword 10 times on the page, but it doesn't actually resolve their question, like they'll just get frustrated because they're like, this isn't actually unique content to me. It's just swapping something out, and people can tell. But certainly if you have information that's unique to somewhere, and rather than doing 50 different landing pages, you use one dynamically, then that can be a useful time-saving tool.
Yeah, we got yes and thanks for first couple of questions about segmentation. So it was okay. We need the free consultant. Okay. People ask you to share your contacts with them because, well, they I don't know. Well, maybe they shy or they don't have a questions today, but they probably will it tomorrow or some day
Sure.
later.
Yeah. If you I'm on Twitter at Amy PPC.
If you just type it in, I'll
Yeah.
just post it straightforward.
That's my Twitter contact.
Okay, Twitter. I'm gonna share it right now. So Twitter
Okay.
is the best form to contact you, or what?
Yeah.
A minute.
Yeah.
Okay, MS Twitter is gonna tweet.
So you can follow me there or hit me up with questions or just whatever you want. It's going to be the best way.
Okay, Twitter is there. Okay, thanks. People say thanks was very informative. Thanks again. Share context. Okay, Alexander, I share the Twitter. So if you have a question to Amy, just tweet her that you were attending her webinar. You like it very much. Tell her she's great first, and
Yeah,
after
tell me.
ask a question, because flattery will get us anywhere.
That's a good point.
It's how I get most of the biggest people here. Flattery, For example, today when I made a post for Jan Willem Bobnik from Holland, I didn't put Amsterdam as a timing. I put Utrecht, city where he is from, and he was extremely happy about that. So flattery. So, guys, when you start asking me questions, first tell her you were attending webinar, was great. She's a great speaker, and after that, ask questions. So she won't be able to refuse.
That's
Okay,
right.
let's see if we have more questions. Okay, so it's very useful info indeed. Never thought this was such a valuable segmentation tool. Eugene Orlov saying, Amy, thanks a lot. Very good, very informative, guys. We yeah. If you have questions, you have to answer them right now. Otherwise, you will do it the way I just described it over the
Yeah, that's
Twitter.
right. I've
But
got to jump pretty soon.
this is less fun. You can just ask question right now. No more questions. If we have more questions, okay. I mean, I ask you. It's not very technical. Obviously, we know SEO, PPC, SEO. Yeah, we all know what's all about. For example, for company like what I'm representing, for example, for all of these webinars, we have great names, big names. We have people who just started, and you can kind of mixture. But and we don't have much budget, because you understand webinars are free. We're not paying
Right.
you.
Right.
People who are watching us are not paying either. It's a free knowledge. Well, nothing is free in the world, of course, but would be PPC would be pay adverts would be effective for us, for example. Do you think you can attract people to watch webinar this way?
I mean, yes, you can attract people to watch the webinar this way, but whether it be effective, you need to understand your ROI. And if you're getting zero, no matter how many people come, then paying for traffic that you can't, unless you have a value for a customer or for, someone to watch, I wouldn't recommend spending budget if you're not going to get a return for it, because you want to make money, not lose money. So I don't know that.
Yeah, we're not making any money. We had Joe Pulitzer from Content Marketing Institute here, and he actually explained how it should be. What he said is, I thought I misread him. He said content first. Was it? What he meant actually, before starting a business, before going into business, you always know what you want, but before really starting, you are putting content first. You're actually making your loyal audience. Your loyal audience for 12 or 18 months. You got your loyal audience. And after that, you can sell them anything. Oh, that's what Joe Pulitzer told us. Okay, you have another question just on a...
Yeah, how do you know physically conversion? You use statistics from CRM or only Google Analytics? Right within the Google AdWords tool, you can see where the conversions are taking place. And so everything I am doing is reconciled within that tool. Like if we see a big discrepancy, then we can dig into GA and start to see if there's any difference. But I'm not using GA to check where the conversions are coming from. I'm using AdWords, because in my case, they are linked. We've got all of our GA data linked with our AdWords data, and so there's no reason to use two separate tools from it when I can just get the same data from one interface. It speeds things up. And then I guess to your point, definitely, I mean, create content, get good at creating content, right? Attract a ton of people, but do that. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything to attract people to great content, and you'll get them to stick. When you're in the position of having to pay for people to come in, you want to make sure you have a business model. Like that's different than a content strategy, because you can do a content strategy without making any money yet. Like, and that's a really good idea to start to pull people in, and then later you get a loyal audience and you start to sell them. It's a different channel, and I was, different measurement tool. I wouldn't use paid search until I can, once I have that, once I've got like a big following and something I'm selling people, then
No,
that's
but
when I
if
would
you
start to
have big
use
following,
PPC.
you won't use paid search because you already have a people. You have the lead, just sell them. So obviously you use paid search when you don't have it, but obviously without a product, you wouldn't start to use a paid search. It's what you're trying to say. Because
Yeah.
obviously now we're not selling anything. We're just
Hmm.
giving everything for free. Yeah,
Right.
with for exchange of your loyalty, maybe. That's what we do. We don't have any product. We don't sell. So what you're saying is absolutely no point from your point of view to use paid search if you don't really sell anything.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a year from now, you're selling your best webinars, at a premium. You're saying, watch these past webinars and it's $10 a month or whatever you're doing. At that point, you're the best webinar company in the world, and you've got all these people who are visiting and everything, right? So things are working really well. It still might be valuable for you to bring those people in, like say someone, for instance, and I'm just throwing this out off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but
sure.
so you've got this Rand Fishkin webinar, and it's amazing, and it converts really well for you. People see that he's on there, and then they're like, I want to get that content, and they pay, they sign up. So you could bid on Rand Fishkin, for instance, as a keyword, right? And then people are looking for that. Then they're like, oh, perfect. And then they go through and they follow your funnel, and then they convert. Like, that's something you could do. But until you have something that's going to make you money, you're kind of throwing money out. Like, you don't want to spend money to get an audience before you have a product to sell.
You have another thing. Well, so somebody actually, people learn. See, Emmy, you have a great experience with that.
Yay,
As every
flattery.
question should start like that. Okay, and you have a question.
Okay, how do you split ads now on average between ads for desktop and mobile devices? What is percentage of ads for desktop and for mobile devices? I think this is a little bit of a confusing way to do things, because you can't actually split them. You can say mobile device preferred, but Google can still show that on a desktop. And if it does well, they're going to show that ad on your desktop more than your other ones, because they kind of have liberty to show whichever ads they want and optimize for whatever's working the best. And so you're not doing like mobile only and desktop only. There's a lot of crossover. So what you can do is, set up 2 that are maybe mobile preferred and 2 for desktop, and then see how they do against each other. But you don't retain full control like you used to. If we're talking 2012, you had different campaigns for different purposes, but at this point it's really more blended, and so you don't have that same, I don't know, luxury or requirement to be building them out separately and then only running them separately. They're not going to stay like truly split.
Well, I don't know, Eugene, if it's answer your question. We'll wait a little bit from Eugene. But I talked to Similar Web a couple of days ago, and they said that now people actually, it's more than 50% that people buying from mobile. According to their data,
Well,
Similar Web, more than 50% people were buying from mobile device than from desktop device.
yeah, in my experience, like e-commerce, people are still buying on desktop. Like, they might be researching on their device. They're usually still going, if they're going to enter their credit card information and purchase something, the purchase is being made from desktop. So mobile's kind of like an earlier in the funnel stage, and then they'll purchase later. So it really depends on your product though, and your model, how likely people are to convert on mobile versus desktop. But yeah, it is getting more and more to mobile. People are getting more comfortable with that.
Okay, guys, I guess we don't have any more questions, or we don't have really much time for more questions. And if you have any question, well, just do what I said to you, and you have Emmy's Twitter on your screens. Okay, thank you very much, Emmy. We have plenty of thanks on our webpage. Thank you very much for being with us. You actually the first volunteer here. You first volunteer. You came from inbound. Are you from
Yeah.
our? Yeah. Okay. You made a history here.
Yay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Yeah, thank you for awesome webinar, and everybody, thanks for staying with us, whatever the time of the day or night it was. We will have another webinar this week about retargeting. It's Australian Don Christie will be with us. It's another volunteer, second volunteer. Yeah, it's kind of volunteer week. Okay, thank you, Amy. I know you have to run.
Yep.
You're already 5 minutes late. Thank you
I
very
know.
much. Thank you very much for
All right.
being with
Thanks.
us. Thank you,
Thanks so much.
guys. Thank you,
All right.
guys.